Do you want to put it? No.
I was going to put it on the table, but just...
Oh, okay. I figured you two should have a nice chance.
Yeah.
Would you squeeze? Okay, so please join me in welcoming Amanda Marchand and Leah Sobsey. So to introduce you briefly, Amanda is a Canadian, New York-based photographer and educator, and uses experimental approaches to photography, particularly to explore the natural world and issues relating to climate change as well. And Leah Sobsey is an image maker, an educator, a gallery director as well, and also is an artist that has a multidisciplinary approach, including design, scientific elements, installation, photography, textile, so many different worlds. And we're here to speak about their book, This Earthen Door, Emily Dickinson's Herbarium, published by the Korean publisher Datz Press. And I guess the first obvious question is, Anglophones know Emily Dickinson as a poet, but maybe we don't see the obvious connection with photography. So what, where did this project originate in relation to her?
So you probably know that Emily Dickinson is from the 19th century and known for her verse punctuated by dashes and spaces, quite avant-garde, and she lived as a hermit almost in her bedroom for a lot of her life, but she wasn't known in her lifetime to be a poet. It wasn't a secret she was writing, but she was known as a gardener, revered for her gardens. She studied botany to such a level that she could have been a teacher of botany. And as a girl, she made a herbarium, very popular in the 19th century, a book of pressed plants with over 400 species of plant that is a hidden treasure, sort of at the intersection of art and science. And we both knew of this and secretly coveted it. And so we began with that in mind, knowing we would never see it because it's too fragile. It lives at Harvard University, tucked away in a vault. And there is a digital version online that's how we knew of the work.
Yeah.
And so you knew of this, and you clearly were interested to be able to engage with it in some way, but how did you develop this into your own project?
Sure. So Amanda and I, we went to graduate school together. I've known each other for many years and decided in the early pandemic to collaborate. And when we landed on Dickinson's herbarium, we decided to create it using anthotypes. So remaking this book of pressed plants using the historical process, the anthotype. And that uses plant pigments to create the photographic emulsion. So that felt really important in terms of thinking about this relationship of Dickinson, the garden that was so critical to her writing, to introduce that element of the plant as the actual photograph.
Can you tell us a little bit about the anthotype process, like what making one of these images that we're seeing involves?
Sure. Just bat it back and forth. Yeah, so anthotypes are typically made by taking plant material, using a mortar and pestle, and in our case, we're using alcohol to create a pigment. And so we're grinding up flowers, adding Everclear is what we used, and then coating or lemon juice, and coating that onto paper. And Amanda said, the original herbarium is too fragile to ever be seen again. So it lives only as a digital archive now. And we were interested in that kind of intersection of analog and digital, and remaking something as this kind of physical object. They get exposed to UV light, and our shortest exposure was about an hour, and our longest was about 3 months. So they're really, this idea of time is centered, in this project, both in the growing, because we grew the plants that we used in the project, and then also the making, the exposure, all of that.
The book is, I imagine an incredibly complex production process, because what you're doing, the images that you're making, the color is essential, they're extremely subtle, there's a kind of materiality to this. So can you say something about the challenges involved with turning these anthotypes into this object? Maybe Amanda.
Definitely, it is a project of sensitivity. We began with these beautiful colors that we were so stunned with the natural palette, a non-synthetic color palette, but they are fugitive. So you cannot fix an anthotype. You can put it in resin, but it still will fade. So we knew we wanted to make a book. We wanted to reanimate Dickinson's original herbarium. And we were lucky to work with Datz Press in South Korea. You should visit their table. They make exquisitely bound, kind of half between a trade book and an artist book, a sensitivity to color, papers, materials, the binding. Every book is unique, very much almost cross between photograph and sculpture, the way they treat the book. So we were really delighted that they had the work in their hands. And as I said, we knew we were starting with an anthotype and that we were going to end with a book. So this digital part was part of the conversation from the beginning. Yeah.
And the book is actually two books. There's a second book that is kind of slid into the cover. So what is this second book that you've included in the project?
Yeah, so we have a sort of insert in the book. Our project is really a two-part project. The first half is the remaking of the original herbarium. The second, we've partnered with botanists to really understand the plant science and the ethnobotany and all of the history tied to the plants. And so on the cover of that insert is a blooming seasonal wheel. So it sort of shows as a data drawing all of the plants that we used and when they would be blooming. And so that's the cover. And then inside, there's more information about the project. We have our timing chart. So for each exposure, each plate, it talks about where we exposed it, how long, how many days. I was making exposures in North Carolina. Amanda was in Canada and in Brooklyn. And so we have these very different experiences in the making. We also have a piece of handmade seeded paper with wildflowers that would have been grown in the Dickinson region. And so the idea is that you can plant that and it will, you water it, will actually grow wildflowers. So this kind of cyclical idea of putting something back into the earth embedded in there.
I'm looking forward to planting that in my garden very soon. In reading about the project, I noted that you described it as an eco-feminist project. And, we've been discussing, I guess, some of the technical aspects of it, but can you say something a little bit more about, that approach?
Definitely. We began at the beginning and we said, mutually we had been working with nature, thinking so much about the environment and our changing world, and wondering what is the future of photography. We work a lot with process, and this was a way for us to investigate working with non-toxic photographic materials and thinking of sustainability and the future of photography and sort of pioneering that in a new direction, even though it's a historic process we haven't seen used too much. And working together, collaborating in the pandemic was really important. We're both mothers. We're at home with our families. One person in our artistic imaginary, even though the inventor of the person who has the credit is a man, Herschel, Sir John Herschel, the inventor of photography, coined the word snapshot. Mary Somerville is equally important to us as somebody who is pioneering the medium at the same time and in conversation with Herschel, but couldn't publish because she was a woman. And she was at home ironing her anthotypes when we were at home in the pandemic, so we think of this. And also working with a female poet as our muse was really important. We wanted to work on something, choosing a woman at the center. So the ecofeminist piece is integrated into all of the work. Yeah.
Yeah, it's fascinating how many projects have emerged from the pandemic, and which have absolutely no relationship to the subject of the pandemic itself, but in the artist talks that we've had over the last days, I guess one of the silver linings of this strange moment for us is a lot of the creative projects that have arose that probably would not have done otherwise. I mean, you just mentioned obviously having the poet, a female poet at the center of this, so text obviously plays a role in the book. So how did you think about integrating the poetry into the book?
So this book doesn't have that much writing in it. There is a little bit in the booklet. We have each of these data drawings, the blooming seasonal wheel that you see there in the beginning, is essentially an image text piece, and this is the second half of the project, not in the book, but it's in our box, in our project, where image and text are integrated, and when we show it in shows, or we're having a museum show in the spring, there will be text panels that explain the images, because they're, having worked with the scientists and the herbarium specialists, the information is an important part. So there's a little bit of text, but even the very calculated way to think about typology of flowers and cataloging which names, the Latin names, all of this became, because we were not botanists, just a very deliberate and quite extensive part of the research that was in conversation with many scientists that contributed to the work, and they're a part of the project too, this larger circle of people that have helped us formulate the work. So, but there are Dickinson poems in it as well. There are Dickinson poems that we've, especially the ones, there's one, to make a prairie, it takes one clover, it takes a clover and a bee, one clover and a bee, and reverie. The reverie alone will do if bees are few. That feels very central to the work for us, and that's in the book.
So Dickinson fans won't be disappointed.
I hope not.
Is there a question from the audience, perhaps? No? Well, then I will take the opportunity to ask you a further question. So we have this intriguing box, and that you just mentioned the museum show. So how do you show this work in a kind of installation or exhibition context?
Yeah, so we, the originals that we made are 11 by 14 because that was the size of Dickinson's herbarium. When we knew we were going to do this project, we knew we were going to make a book first, so all of these are scanned. But we actually exhibit the work as large prints. So typically, 30 by 40 for the botanicals, and then what we call our chromataxis, these data drawings, those come to life as installations on the wall. So, they might live as a print, they might take up an entire wall, and those are just our plant pigments. So essentially our unexposed photographic paper, so coated with pigment before it gets exposed. And each one of those talks about a different topic, so rare and endangered, invasive species, pollinators, and for us thinking about sort of, again, how this is tied to, our current climate crisis and this kind of ongoing conversation about the importance and significance of plants that really get overlooked. I think, from our time, thinking about this kind of contemporary herbarium, what might that look like? So the exhibitions, like I said, they have both the botanicals and also these kind of data drawings that live as large installations.
Terrific. Thank you both very much for presenting this project.
They were signing, but if people want to return to Datz Press,
Okay.
we will be there.
So if you'd like to go back to the Datz Press booth, you can continue speaking with Amanda and Leah and possibly open this intriguing box and see what's inside.
Thank you so much, Mark.
Thank you.